Take a while. We are on the Mem Gimel Omid Aleph, and I believe the last thing we learned um, was Esav Tzuras Darkling. I believe that's what we got up to. Yishton Rabbanon, about 15 lines down from the top of that Mem Gimel Omid Aleph. Zog the Helig of the Gemara. Ton Rabbanon, Esav Tzuras Darkling. What does a darkling look like? What is this dragon that we're referring to? That could be a Zara. What does it look like? Pirush of Shimon Lazar, Kol Sheyesh Leit Tzitzin Bein Propa. If it has some type of fins in between its joints. Machri Rab Asi. So Rab Asi showed Bein Pirkei Tzavar. So I guess coming out of its neck, it has some type of fin sticking out, but there's something around its neck. That is what a simon of a darken is, and therefore, if it doesn't have that, it wouldn't be considered a darken, and therefore, it wouldn't be usher to keep such a keli with such pictures unless it has those fins around its neck. I'm not sure. I don't know my dragons well. Gimel and Aleph, I think. Is the name of Gimel, or am I making a mistake? Right. I'm not ahead enough. We talked to more weiter. I don't remember where I finished yesterday. I thought I finished around there. Talk more weiter. Amar Rabba Bar Bar Chana Amr Shubin Levi. Pamachas Hayisi. That's what I was up to. Pamachas Hayisi. Mahalach Achar Rabbi Lozer Kapper Beribi. Bederach. I was walking behind Rabbi Lozer Kapper in the city of Ribi in the road. So I'm walking behind him and I'm observing this incident. Tabas. I saw Rabbi Lozer found a ring, a valuable ring. He wanted it, but he was afraid that it was Avoda Zara. But let Tzuras Darkling. It had a Tzuras Darkling on it, which would indicate that it could be Avoda Zara. So what he did was, first he encountered he found a Ovid Khabim. So whatever he wanted to accomplish, he felt that an Ovid Khabim wouldn't be able to accomplish that. Then Matza Ovid Khabim Gadol. Then he found an Ovid Khabim adult, and told him, Batla, be mevatlet Avodah Zarah. So now we see what he wanted to do. He wanted a goy to be mevatl the Avodah Zarah before he would pick it up, and then he would be able to use it. But if he would pick it up first, before the goy was mevatlet, then it would be awesome. Anyway, the goy did not want to be mevatlet, v'lo bitla. So you know what he did? Such he gave him a punch, a rap across the face. And he convinced the guy to do it. Ubata, and then the guy did it. So from this, and then Rabbi Lozer Kappa took the ring and he had an offer on it. So Zogt, Rabbi Barbechana, I learned three things from this little incident that I witnessed with Rabbi Lozer Kappa. Shemami Natlash. Shemami no Ovid Kechavim Mevatel Avodah Kechavim Shaloi V'Shel Chaveri. This wasn't that particular guy's Avodah Zarah, yet Rabbi Lozer Kappa relied on a random guy being Mevatel. So see, that's what he holds. You can only do mevatel if you know what avodah zarah is. A little child doesn't know. So therefore, Rabbi Lozer didn't want to use a cotton, he only wanted to use a gadol. And the third thing is, we also learned that here he didn't want to be mevatel avodah zarah, but Rabbi Lozer beat him up. So you see that even if it's a forced bittul of the Avodah Zarah, it is effective. Megadef by Rab Chanina. Rab Chanina was very unhappy. Why would Rabbi Lozer even need to be mevatel Avodah Zarah? The lesson of Rabbi Lozer, a kapper beribi hadatnan. The halach is hamatzal min hari. If you have something in the mouth of an hari and you get it away from him, umin adoiv, umin anomer, umin agais, from an army, umin anor, or from a river, umizut shal yam, and from the yam. He's pulling it out of a current, which for sure the Bailam were miyayish if their object was in this situation. You find something in a huge place where no one would ever expect to find something that they've lost. There surely is. You're allowed to keep something that you find in such a scenario. Because the Bailam is surely miyayish. So surely whoever owned this Avodah Zarah, whichever guy owned this Avodah Zarah, was already miyayish. So why isn't the Avodah Zarah bottle already Why did Rabbi Elazar Kappa have to make a new bittul on it? Sure, the owner of this getchke was miyayish from ever getting it back, but that doesn't mean he wants to make it ois getchke. Meisur mi miyayish. Will he be miyayish from giving the godliness? No, he's still considered this getchke a god. Why? Meimar Amar, you know what the guy is going to say? If it is found by a guy, surely its finder will service it. So the guy believes the God decided to change his customers, but he's still a getchkin. But even Yisrael mashkechla, the guy thinks to himself, and even if a Jew finds it, I did not marry current, the bought it's expensive. Maz bin la ibid kechavim uplachla. What will the Yid do with it? He'll sell it to another guy. So this getchka will still be served by another guy. So although he's mevatel although he's miyash from ever getting it back, that doesn't mean he feels that it lost its godliness, and therefore Rabbi Elazar Kappa had to have a guy be mevatel in order for him to be able to use that ring. So that's awesome. The most tzurais levanois hayu loyler Rabbi Gamliel bal Yosy betavla bekaisa. Rabbi Gamliel used to have in his attic, in a chart on the wall, he would have pictures or forms of the Levant in different positions. So when a Yid came to say Eidos that he saw the moon, Shebahen Mara es Hajoitas, people who didn't know astronomy well, he was able to show them different scenarios, and the aid would be able to say, yeah, that's what it looked like, that's what I saw. Did you see something that looks like A, or did you see something that looks like B? And this way he would know if what they saw was a possibility or an impossibility. And if what they say is no, if they say that's what happened, that's what I saw, and he knows there could never be such an arrangement, he would know that he cannot rely on these agents. But the problem is, how was Rabbi Gamliel allowed to have a demus of the moon? Umishari, Vaksiv, we learned in the pasuk it says, Loisasun iti, don't make the pasuk Loisasun iti leiches alezov. But we darshan Loisasun kidmis shamshai hameshamshim lefonai. Don't make forms of my mishamshim like the celestial beings, the stars and the planets. Don't make those things. So how was Rabbi Gamliel allowed to do that? Amar Abaye, Zokta Abaye, Lo Yasra Torah Ella Shamshin She'efsher Lasos Kamoisa. The only types of things that you're not allowed to make a demus of are things that you could actually make them in real. Nobody could make a real moon. Nobody could make a real sun. So therefore, you're allowed to make a demus of a moon, a demus of a sun. What are you not allowed to do? Kidatanya Lo Yas Odam Bayis Tavnes Eichel. A person is not allowed to build a house for himself in the exact dimensions of the Heichel. That's what the Moshe not allowed to do. Achsadra, Tavnis Ulam. Achsadra, that's in the shape of an Ulam. Chotzer, Tavnis Azara. Or a Shulchan, Tavnis Shulchan. Or a Menorah, Tavnis Menorah. Avalu also, you know what type of Menorah you are allowed to make? Shalhei, Vishalvav, Vishalches. With 5 arms, with 6 arms, with 8 arms, like we do for Hanukkah. But Vishal Zayin, a menorah with 7 branches, like they had in the Beis Hamikdash, lo yasa, afilu shel shar mini matches. Even if it's not made out of gold, even if it's made out of other metals, one is not allowed to do that. And that is what the pasuk of Loisasaniti is referring to, which would not have prohibited Rabbi Gamliel from making a chart with different tzuros of the Levant. You're not even allowed to make a menorah made out of wood. Because when the Chashmonai took back over the Beis Hamikdash, they had very little money, and they couldn't afford to construct a gold menorah, so they actually made it out of wood. Amrulai, so they told Rabbi Yehuda, you're making a mistake. From the Beis Chashmonai, it was not made out of wood. Misham Raya, Shvudin Shal Basil Hoyu, it was made out of tin, butz, bedil. Is bedil lead? I'm not sure what metal it is, but it was made out of a cheaper metal. The chayfin bebats, and it was covered with tin. I think bats is tin. It was covered with tin, but it was made out of bedil. Is bedil lead? But it's made out of because there's shvun shel barzil hayu, and Rashi Taishas I'm sorry, Barzel is iron, but Rashi touches as bedil with tin. So steel that was plated with tin was less expensive than gold, but it was not wood. Hashiru, once they became wealthier, Asum Shal Kesef, they were able to upgrade the menorah and make it out of silver. Chazu ve'Hashiru Asum Shal Zav. So you're not allowed to make a menorah out of any type of metal, but out of wood, maybe you would be allowed to. So that's the machlokes.
Now, very few people remember this, but when the Avoda was first built in the early 60s, there was a menorah placed on top of the
The
uh,
entrance.
entrance.
I remember that.
You do remember it,
I remember the menorah.
and they had to take it down because of this problem.
Oh, that's 7 branches?
Yeah,
Oh, wow. I never caught that. So who caught it?
I don't remember.
Uh, but it got caught before Rabbi Loi, long before Rabbi Loi.
Yes, yes.
Oh, wow. Okay. Vishamoshin she'iev shel asois kamois on mishari. So the Gemara took a position where you are allowed to make a demus of a chama on a levana because those are shamoshim that we couldn't build. So Zok Gemara, are you really saying that that's mutter? I'll prove to you that it's not mutter. So the kasha is back on Rabbi Gamliel. How is he allowed to do it? Where do you see that it's not mutter? But Tani we learned loy sasun iti. What does that mean? Loy sasun kidmush shamshai hamashamshim lefanai bamorai. Bamorim doesn't mean a heichal. Bamorim doesn't mean a menorah. Bamorim means in disguise. Almozak Rashi shamashim al yedim ka'aser. So we're right back to our kasha. How was Rabbi Gamliel allowed to do that? Amar Abaye turning onto Mem Gimel Amid Beis. Loy kasha. It's not. I'm sorry. Loy asra Torah ella b'demus dalit ponim b'hadadadi. You know what it means? The shamashim b'moraim. It's referring to the partzufim on the kisei hakavod, as Rashi says, pnei shar v'adam v'aryeh v'nesher, an ox, a person, a lion, and an eagle. L'chaya achas, for one animal. It's a four-headed animal. Dugyim is chayis hakodesh. That are like the chayis hakodesh, which are celestial beings that are way up there. Yechsev iti hashriyas etli, those that hang around over here. So le asr Torah ela b'demus dalit ponim b'hadedadi. Zok Gemara elamayata. So what you're saying is that parts of Adam l'chudeit history, based on what you're saying, that the prohibition is only if there's four partsufim on one chaya, that's asr. But the parts of an Adam by himself, you're allowed to make. Alomatanya. Why did we learn? Call our partsufos mutarin. All partsufos are mutar. Chutz mi parts of Adam. If the prohibition is to make four together, why is a part of Adam on its own prohibited? And for the Gemara, Amar Rab Huna Barei de Rav Yeshua. Amar Rab Huna Barei Rav Yeshua. Mi Pirkei Rav Yeshua Shmielei. I learned in Shir by Rabbi Yeshua the following drasha: Loisasun iti, loisasun oisi. Don't make oisi, which is referring to the demus of a person. Aval shar shamoshim shori. But again, other shamoshim are going to be mutter, which means like the sun and the moon. Dafka the partsufim are usher, but other celestial beings are going to be allowed. Frank Kamar, is that so? Once again, Akash on Rabbi Gamliel. Latanya Lesasan Iti, Lesasan Kudmush Shimshi, my servants, Hameshamshim Lefane Bemorim, Kigoyin, Oifanim, Usrafim, the Chayes HaKodesh, Umalachai Asharis. So you see, it's right there referring to others, not just the four-part sufim. So it should include the Levana as well. Rabbi, no, maybe this pasuk does not include the sun and the moon. Maybe in the upper heavens where these malachim live, but in the lower heavens, like where the sun and the moon and the stars live, so you want to say it's mutter? So comes the Gemara now with another attack. Are you still trying to tell me that the lower celestial beings, like the planets and the moon and the sun, those are mutter? But Tanya, we learned, and this is a checkmate. Asher b'shamayim l'rabois chama uluvana kochavim umazolis. Mimal is l'rabois malachei asharis. So here we say clearly it's also to make these tours. So how was Rabbi Gamliel allowed to make it? Zok Gemara Kitanya Hila Oivdam. Maybe that pasuk isn't saying that you're not allowed to make it. Maybe it's saying you're not allowed to serve them. You're not allowed to make them into an actual Avodah Zara. Zok Gemara Ila Oivdam. If the Torah is trying to tell you what you're not allowed to serve and treat as a god, as a getchke, afilu shilshul katanami. We already learned if someone shechs even l'shem shilshul katan shebayam, that's also going to be usher. That's Avodah Zara. So that cannot be what this pasuk means when the pasuk is prohibiting Avodah Zara with the shemesh and the areach. The Tanya, you're right. You're 100% right. Umisevit the kranafka. You know how you know that it's also to make, it's also to serve as a god, even a shilshul katan. You actually know from this pasuk, and as the pasuk progresses, it tells us a greater chiddush after a greater chiddush. So we know you're not allowed to serve the cham and levana. We know from Asher B'Shamayim Mimal, but shilshul katan we know from the later words in the same pasuk. The pasuk is building up the chiddush of chumrah that even a shilshul katan wouldn't be allowed to be served. The Tanya Asher Ba'aretz l'Rabbis Yomim u'Naharos Harim u'Gvois mitachas, which is the next word in the pasuk. L'Rabbis shilshul katan. Period. So you see clearly that could be we can fatach this pasuk is not prohibiting creating such a tzura, which would be a problem for Rabbi Gamliel. Rather, it's just referring to serving them. I should have read the whole pasuk inside because this is one of the psukim in the Aseret Sedivros. It says loisase lacha pesel v'chol tamuna asher b'shamayim mimal v'asher ba'oretz mitachas asher b'mayim mitachas la'oretz is referring to aser us to do avodah zara even on the shilshul katan. Pray to Gemara, back to our kasha again. So you're telling me you're allowed to make it, you're just not allowed to serve it? I'll prove to you that you're not allowed to make a tzura of a cham and levana. But here the Brisa itemizes what we're referring to. Checkmate on Rabbi Gamliel. How is he allowed to do it? You have a mefurish Brisa that says you're not allowed to. And for the Gemara, Chani Rabbi Gamliel, he didn't make it for himself. They had Goyim make it. So Tosfos gets into a whole discussion. How are you allowed to tell a Goy to do it? Amir la'akam shvus. So Tosfos says, Sikshar Rav Elchanan, l'chayr mashmash et tziva Rabbi Gamliel, lo'avit k'chavim, lasos. He ordered this from a Goy. We know that Amir la'akam shvus is also midrabanan by an Isur Shabbos. But Zok Tosfos, this prohibition of asking a goy to do something that's also for you applies to anything that's also. Tosfos says maybe it was for the purpose of a mitzvah. The Rabbanan allowed Rabbi Gamliel to have a goy make it for him. And then there's a whole shiloh Tosfos discusses if you're allowed to have a goy sign for you if there's a problem with the Zara. You're not allowed to use like a signature ring or a signature that has a Tzuras Adam. If there's a chayiv, elam kein hayav kechavim maybe unless the guy brought the chasima, because again the question is, are you allowed to? Okay, so Zok Gemara weiter. V'ha Rabbi Yehuda da'acherim asuloi. Rabbi Yehuda's case. And we're going to cite Rabbi Yehuda's case in just a moment, where it was also a case where Goyim made it, and you see it wasn't allowed. So how could your Gamaliel do it? What was the case? Rabbi Yehuda had a ring that was given to him by a Goy. The Amalei Shmuel, and there was a signet ring, but it has a protruding tzura of something that was also. The Amalei Shmuel Rabbi Yehuda, and Shmuel told Rabbi Yehuda, "Shouldn't a sharp one, Sami Eine Dedain, damage the ring." Mess up the look, like when you have dolls or people used to cut off the nose in a doll, right? So it shouldn't be like a getchke. So that's what Shmuel told Rabbi Yehuda to do, damage the tzura. So you see clearly, even though a guy made it for Rabbi Yehuda, Shmuel held it wasn't allowed. Zok Gemara, Hasam v'chois my boilate umshum shab. There it was speaking where the tzura stuck out. So when he would put the signet ring into wax to seal something, it would be concave. Concave means it goes in. because if the tzura of the ring sticks out, the form that it makes is something that sticks in. Why didn't Shmuel want Rabbi Yehuda to maintain it? It was umishum chashada, because people would be choshing him that he services this avodah zarah. He keeps a little getchka. So really, be'etem, it's not a problem. But there's a problem of chashada. So it's not a problem of the emes making a tzura because the guy made it, but it still doesn't look good. I'm sorry. Only because the things that they make for avodah zarah is only if it's boiled. Correct. The Tanya we learned tabas shechoisma boiled, a tabas whose choisim sticks out. That's also lanicha. You're not allowed to wear it because it's like wearing a getchka on your hand. But umutu lachsimba, you're allowed to use the seal because choisma shekeya. I'm sorry. Period. Mutu lachsimba because the seal, like the wax that you put into the clay that you put into, is going to have a concave impression, and that's not a problem. It's only if it sticks out. But choisma shekeya, if it's choisim, if the form on the ring itself is concave, then muter lanicha, you're allowed to wear it because it's not an avodah zarah, it doesn't stick out. But also lachtimba, because the chasima that you make is going to take on that three-dimensional form. Is chshad an issue? You're telling me that the reason why Shmuel wanted Rabbi Yehuda to degrade his ring is because someone would think that he's serving avodah zarah, but it's not true. Because Beknishta the Shaf v'Yosef, there was a Beknishta in a city that was called Shaf v'Yosef. That's one pshat in Rashi. The city was Shaf v'Yosef, but Shaf means loosen up and sit on it. And Rashi says it could be that this Bismedrash, they took stones from the Beis Hamikdash, from Yerushalayim, not from the Beis Hamikdash, that would be Hektish, from Yerushalayim. Very interesting pshat, Rashi says. V'yeshayim Yechanya, who's a king, v'Galusai, he was by the first Beis Hamikdash, he was the kings that were sent into Galus Bavel. Notlu imoed me'avni Yerushalayim. They took from the Avni Yerushalayim, ume'afram from its earth, uvanu sham. They built a bismedish with the stones of Yerushalayim that they took with them when they went into Galus. Found the shop of Yosef and Avoda. I don't know if the other knows that the bells of bismedish is a replica of the real bismedish that they had in bells in Europe. And when I took a tour with Dirshu of the bells of Bismedrash, they told us that they say that they took windows from glass, from stones, from Yerushalayim, from the Beis Hamikdash. I don't know exactly how they got them there in bells, but they said, yeah, definitely this bells of Bismedrash didn't take those stones. They didn't have those stones, but they still made it to be a replica. But the akpada that they had is the bells represent Alpi Ruach HaKodesh. When he built the Bismedrash in real bells, that there's a direct line from Abba Shmedish in the city of Bells straight to the Makam HaMikdash, and there's not one Dover Tumah in between. It's not going through a church. So if you drew a straight line from the Shmedish and Bells straight to the Makam Kodesh HaKodeshim, there would be no churches in that line. So when they built the bells of Bismedrash in Eretz Yisrael, they used a satellite photo to make sure that it would have the same feature. So because there's a lot of churches in the old city around there, so they made sure that there's a straight line that it wouldn't have to go through a church, so that tefillah don't have to divert; they can go straight. Zok to Gemara, but I'll call upon them. So there was this shul in Arda, the Ukmi Bey Adar and the Arta. It had like a statue of a king. V'hayu Ailu Boy, Avoda Shmuel, V'Levi, Avoda Shmuel and Levi would go into that Medrash. Umatlu begavei, and they would daven there. For loy chayshi lichshada, and they weren't worried that people would say that they're being over avodah zarah. So Gemara, Rabbim shiny. When you're talking about Medrash, one guy alone, when no one's looking, he'll have a taiva, he'll be over avodah zarah. But the Rabbim of a Medrash, there's no shad. That's why there's no problem. Right? The Gemara, Rabbim gamliel de yacharu. So you say chshada. That was the reason why Shmuel told Rabbi Yehuda to degrade his ring form. Well, Rabbi Gamaliel was a yachid as well. Why wasn't he concerned about chshada? So Gemara, because keeping the nasihu shrichi rabbim gabei. If you're a nasi, your house is a rishus rabbim. Everybody's in and out, so therefore he has the status of rabbim, and there's no chshada, and that's why he was able to have these forms. There's another pshat on how Rabbi Gamaliel's forms were allowed. They were not made solid; they were made out of pieces. So most of the time, he kept them disassembled. when he had a need to show a prospective witness different examples of what the witness might have seen, he would assemble it, but then he would immediately disassemble it. That's not a problem for a chashada. The boy sema l'Islamic shiny. You're allowed to make avodah zarah if you're not serving it, but if you're making it specifically to learn the halachas of avodah zarah. The Tanya lo silmad lasos. Don't learn from the going to do to copy. You're allowed to learn it to be able to pass it. Like we know, they were the Sanhedrin had to have a kishuf macher. It's also do kishuf, but they needed someone who knew what kishuf is. Zok to Gemara weiter. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says only if the tzura is on the mechubadik keli. If it's not on the mechubadik keli, then there's no concern that it's avodah zarah. Frag to Gemara ezo hein mechubaden ve'ezo hein mevusim. How do you determine what's a choshev keli and what's not? Amarav mechubaden is l'mayla b'namayim. If the tzura on the keli is above the water line, that will be mechubaden. But mevuzin, if it will be l'mata b'namayim, below the water line. Shmuel Amar, Shmuel said, Elu ve'elu mevusim. Anywhere on a cooking utensil, that's not a mokim mechubed to place the picture of an avodah zarah. So there we'll just say it's a decoration to the keli. Mevuzin. Ella elu hein mechubaden shalashirayim. Well, nazov mishirayim are nice. Shirayim are tzmidim, nice bracelet. While nazomim are nice nose rings. If it's on your jewelry, without the boys. Tanya kabasei de Shmuel mechubaden shalashirin v'al nazomim v'al tabois. That's what mechubadim are, where these tours for the ulcer. Like mevuzin would be al yours on pots, v'al kumkumsim and water heaters, v'al mechame amayim and other types of water heaters, v'shalasadinin that are on sheets, v'al mitpachos that are on a mitpachos like a sheet, like a towel. But Tosfos says it doesn't make sense to say because it's the same thing as a sadin. So Tosfos goes matbeos. Tzuras on coins are no problem. And that's why Tosfos, in this little Tosfos here at the side, says, even if it has a tzura of a getchke, the kelim are mutter, and at the bottom, the tzionim say, some coins had crosses on them in those days. Even a coin with a cross is going to be mutter, because that's not called a mokum mechubed, it's called a mokum mechuzah. So it can't be a tzura, just a decoration. What do you do if you have a stone or if you have a metal of a dessert? You can't burn it, so you grind it. We learned this Mishnah yesterday. And you throw it into the air, or you throw it into the yam. They told him that doesn't help. Throwing it into the air would be a problem because if you throw it into the air, it's going to land. Those particles are going to land on someone's field, and they're going to have the effect of nourishing the field. So weiter, someone's going to have an off from it. And you can't even have that minute hana. You know why? Even a little bit. So there's a machlokes between Rabbi Yosy and Chomim. The Chom holds you would not be able to be Zayrit l'ruach. You'd have to still throw it into the yam. And Rabbi Yosy holds you can just be Zayrit l'ruach. That will be adequate. Zog to Gemara. Tanya we learned. Omelem Rabbi Yosy. Rabbi Yosy told him, I'll prove to you that you could do it. It says in the pasuk, in reference to the egel, and this is in this week's parsha, so we can say that the Leblina strikes again. It says in the pasuk as follows: the es chatascha, the chatas that you did, asher asisem es egel, lakachti zakmoish, I took it, for esref oisa be'esh, I burnt the egel, for ekes oisa tachain heitav ad asherdak lofer, I ground it down into a powder, for ashlich es aforai el hanachal hayorid minahar, and they threw it into the nachal hayorid minahar. Amalam Rabbi Yosy, but like v'nemar ve'etz chataschem asher asitzem es egel lokachti v'asref oisa be'esh v'akis oisa tachan heitev ad ashedak la'ofer v'ashlich asafari el hanachal hayorid minahar. So Rashi says that from the v'akis oisa tachan heitev, it's mashma that actually the Rashi on this pasuk here is further down. It's further down Rashi. It might even be on a base. The Rashi for this shtickle in the Gemara. I believe it might even be on a base. Oh no, here it is. It's just further down a little. So the kasha that Rabbi Yosy bring a rye from is from the ve'ekos oisay tachin. Ve'ekos oisay tachin, hate, they're grounded. So you see, grinding in and of itself is a way to dispose of the Avoda Zara, which is exactly what Rabbi Yosy said. The Tanakam or the Chachamim were arguing and saying it could lead to someone having enough from it. You see, Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't concerned. So that was the kasha. Zok Gemara Amar Loi, they told him, Misham Raya, you're bringing a raya from that pasuk. That raya proves you wrong. That pasuk proves you wrong. Harehu Omer v'Yazer al Pnei Amoyim v'Yashkas Pnei Yisrael. The pasuk says what he did with it. He put it into water, and they used that as meisaita to have people drink from it. And if they were chayte, it caused them to die. Loin niskaven elo lebot kisaitais. So fakert. You see that he put it into the water. That's what he was doing with it. So that's why there wasn't a problem of Isra and there. Amal Rabbi Yosy, but the gam macha. This is going into Novi, where Macha was a good king, and what he did was he dismantled Avoda Zara. So let's look at the pasuk inside. The gam Macha, aim asa hamelach. I'm trying to get this to focus. Oh, here's the gam Macha, the king of Macha, aim asa hamelach, the mother of Asa hamelach, who's a bad lady, who was an Avoda of Avoda Zara, Hesira migvira. Asher Asher, he removed her from power because she made an because you know what she did? He removed her from power because she was in Avoda Zara. You know what she did? She She made a mifletzes for the Asherah. We'll see what that is, but you have to make sure that when we learn what a mifletzes is, you put it on silent and no one can hear what a mifletzes is, because you might not be allowed to learn Daf Yomi anymore when we learn what the translation of a meflatzis is. You know it also, Yichrais also as meflatzta, he also cut it off, Vayodek, Vayisroi, V'nachal Kidron, he burnt it. So let's first see what the limud is relevant to our Gemara. So Zokt Gemara, Zokt Rabbi Yosy, V'lenemar, V'gam Asira, Megvirash, also meflatzta, Vayodek, Vayisroi, V'nachal Kidron. So you see that he burnt it and threw it into Nach Kidron, and Rashi says v'loichayish lezevel miviyoda kamoisev, from the fact that it was ground down and there was no concern that these particles were going to be used by someone to fertilize. So they told him back, fakert, amalim mishamaraya. You know why he threw it into Nachal Kidron? Because Nachal Kidron ain't megadol tzmachin. The earth in Nachal Kidron could never grow. So that's why they threw it there. They threw it there because there was no concern. But Avoda, normally there would be a concern. Are you telling me nothing ever grows in Nachal Kidron? But Tanya, we learned all of the dam that was drained from the Mizbeach into the Amma, into the river, the little brook that went through the Beis HaMikdash, side the dam apnim, inside the dam achitza, and everything got mixed together in this little brook. And it would drain out ultimately to Nachal Kidron, and the farmers there who had properties around Nachal Kidron, they would buy this excess blood and water lezavel, because that draining into their fields actually helped their fields, and therefore umay alamba zakta gemara mekaymais yeshpai. There's many different areas in Nachal Kidron. Yesh mokem megadol tzmachim, and in those areas is where the farmers bought this drainage because it helped their fields grow. But v'yesh mokem she'ein megadol tzmachim, and that's where they threw these ashes in a place where we had no concern that there would be this problem. So at the end of the day, the Gemara brings different psukim to try to prove the ashes are a problem, the ashes are not a problem, or the grinds are a problem, the grinds aren't. And we don't have a conclusion because there's a machlokes. Rabbi Yosy says it wouldn't be a problem, and the Rabbanan it would be a problem. Now let's get back to the pasuk. What was this mifletzes that this woman made for the Asherah? Rabbi Yehuda, it was off the charts in Latzonis of what she built on this Asherah tree. What did she build already? That's off the charts on Latzonusa. Kedetani Rabbi Yosef, Kimin Zachris Asasalah. the only way to touch this is it's a dildo. She literally made a dildo connected to the tree, and she would go to the tree and be nevelas by the tree every single day. So that's what she made, and that's what was chopped off and was destroyed. If the Gemara didn't tell us these stories, we wouldn't be able to make them up on our own. But this is not the Gemara, this is the Navi. This is what this woman queen did once upon a time. I wonder how her husband felt about it.
But the connection to the Asherah, though, Asherah is a tree, isn't it?
Right, so she could be she had formed out of that Sarah an appendage. She had it carved out. We always wonder where the word wood comes from. That we know.
Yeah.
She turned from a tree of life to a tree of love. I'm Mifletzet has a in modern
everything we do and
Hebrew,
say can be held against us in the court of law. Just remember.
Okay, I think Mifletzet in modern Hebrew means monster, or means I didn't even know if it's a vampire or a ghost of some kind. I think because that term is still used in modern Hebrew.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if it has a reference to that or not, but I'll check.
Okay, okay, geweldig. So Amalei Rabbi Yosy. So Rabbi Yosy came back to prove that there's no problem with this or no. But look for Nemar the chotas nochash nechoshes. I should read the word properly. The chidas. So which king was this? This was the king of who? So Chizkiah wanted to remove any shemetz of Avoda Zara from Klal Yisrael. And what he did was he even took the Nochash and Achoshes that Moshe Rabbeinu built in the Midbar. He even took that away, and it says, they chopped it, they ground it up. If they ground it up, what did they do with it? They threw it into the air. How come you don't have a problem, Chacham? I told you it's mutter. How come you don't have? You hold it usher because it's going to land in someone's field and it's going to help it. Because Rashi says just as v'chitas, the assumption is that it was just dumped into the air. Rashi says it. Is it Tosfos? Maybe it was Tosfos who says that. Here, umistama lo yishlichu yam melach even shabola saper meiser and mishlichu yam hayolay loimer kashim and farshvayil. If it meant that they threw it into the yam, it would have said so. So Zog to Gemara. They don't forget. You can't bring a raya from there. You know who the Nachash Nachoshes belonged to? It was the personal belonging of Moshe Rabbeinu. It wasn't a public thing, and therefore, Mishalach, make it from your own resources. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't make it as an avodah zarah, but belonged to Moshe. If I have something in my house, if I have a bike in my house, and you decide you want to bow down to it, you're not going to be able to make my bike asher b'ano. So therefore, it never was an avodah zarah. So there is no concern if its particles fall in someone's field and nourishes the field. You know why? Because it didn't have the status of an avodah zarah. Rather, he was just trying to stop them from doing avodah zarah, but that would never be asur anyway. So Rabbi Yosef responded back, but it says when Klal Yisrael was going after the Plishtim, they dropped their stuff and fled. So it says they abandoned their avodah zarahs. Vayisem David v'anosham, and David and his people picked them up. So Vayisem means that they grinded it and threw it into the air, exactly like Rabbi Yosy is saying. How do I know? My mashma with Vayisem David means lishna d'zruyahu. How do I know that's what it means? Kidemetagim Rabbi Yosef Tizraim v'ruach tisoyim. They would be thrown into the wind, and the wind would carry them. Umetagaminon that pasuk tizrinon v'ruach titaltalinon. So that's how we know that Vayisam means he made him airborne. And therefore, you have a ride that there's no problem that it might land in somebody's field. Amrullah Misham Raya, the Rabban told the you don't have a ride from there. Harayu Oimer, it also says, referring to this same incident, but in a different sefer, I think in Divrei Yom, it says Vayisrafu Be'esh, they burnt it. Since it doesn't say together in the same pasuk, they burned it and then they threw it into the air. Shemamina vayisei mamish. You know what vayisei means? Vayisei isn't talking about the destruction. The vayisrafim, I believe in Divrei Hayamim, is talking about the destruction. Vayisei means they actually picked them up and took them with them. As Rashi says, not lamimoy, the people of David's army, actually took these idols, v'nehenemen, and had enough of them. They're aser bana, they're avodah zarah. We're going to soon see that they're not. U'mitchila amar lavadav l'sarfan, and so really David told them to burn them, but they took them. So zok to Gemara, mikamakim kashu kraya dadi. We have a stira because in Divrei Hayamim it says they burnt them, and I think it's in the Malachim it says that they carried them. Is it also bana needs to be burnt, or is it mutter bana and you're allowed to keep them? Zok to Gemara kedir Rafuna Rami Rafuna had a stira. Ksiva yomer David v'yisrafu b'eish u'ksiva yisoim. So which one is it? Kasha kan kodim shaba itai hagiti kan la'acher shaba itai hagiti. Who is itai hagiti? Rashi says he was the guy who came to be mevatel avodah zarah. So before itai hagiti came and was mevatel them, David said burn it. It's also bana. But then itai hagiti came. He was mevatel the avodah zarah. A goy could be mevatel the avodah zarah, and therefore now mutar bana. It says the Chesiv says in the pasuk, the yikach es ateres malkom me'al roisha. They took the adornment of Malcolm, which was the name of an avodah zarah, is what Rashi teaches us from the head of the avodah zarah. And you know how heavy this adornment was? Umishkola kikar zav, which is a very heavy amount of money. Umi shari, how could it be mutter? Isuri hanoninu, it's also bana. And in that Amar Nachman, itai hagitei ba ubitla. So the same way there in the pasuk, we relied on itai hagitei, the goy who was mevatel this a terrorist l'avodah zarah. So too he was mevatel those atzabeim, and that's why Klal Yisrael was allowed to take them. Like you saw him, they were able to take them at them. Frank Gemara Mishkala, Hikazov, that's extremely heavy. How could you put that on the head of a Jewish king, on the head of David HaMelech? It's way too heavy. It doesn't mean he literally wore the same crownish type of thing, a crown or ornament. He didn't really wear it. It meant it was so beautiful, it was fit for a king. But Avoda, you couldn't wear it, it was too heavy. Believe it or not, there was an incredible arrangement they made. They had a heavy, strong magnet on the ceiling of the room where David sat, and that suspended the ornament above David's head, so it looked like he was wearing it, but its weight was not resting upon David's head. It doesn't literally mean it was the weight of a kikar zav. What it means is it had the value. It had the value of a kikar zav because of a very expensive jewel. So according to the first shot, it's just Ru'ila Nuch. He didn't actually wear it. But we're going to soon see if you want to enforce Malchus, you have to dress the part. You know, it's brought down that the Rishna used to wear Malchus to begodim. He wore fancy boots, but they had no soles. I don't know. It's a good shot. I don't know. Zois Haisali, I got this benefit. David HaMelech says in Tehillim, keep pikudecha notzarti, because I listened to your commandments. My Kamar, what exactly does he mean to say? Hachi Kamar, bischar shepikudecha notzarti, ibalt, I listened to your mitzvahs. Ibalt, that happened. Zois Haisali la'edus. This was for me an edus. My edusa. What is the edus? Rabbi Shua Levi, Shahaya Manichai b'makim tefillin v'hilam. This ornament fit on his head, and he was able to fit it there, and it fit properly. Now the problem is the makom tefillin is flat. There's a flat area on your head that the tefillin sits on, but this ornament had a curvature, yet it still fit him. Frank the Gemara. So David HaMelech was saying that the fact that the ornament fit him, even though with the shape it shouldn't have, was a nace that he's thanking HaKadosh Baruch Hu because that gave him legitimacy as a king. David HaMelech had a lot of opposition. He had to fight a long time to become a king. First, he was only in Hebron, and then he moved up to Yerushalayim. So that was a very big indication that the HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to make him a king. So he was thankful that the Rebbe Shalom gave him that sign that he was a king. But frank the Gemara, how could he have put it in the Mukam film? He wore tefillin the whole day. How could he have had that there as well? There's enough place on the head of a person. Now, it's very interesting because the way you would visualize it is there's room for two tefillin. Is it one beside the other or is it one behind the other? If it's one behind the other, I can see how you could wear like a talus over your head, which would be the ornament that would cover the back. And the front Rosh he still wore. And that's how some Rishonim learn. But Rashi learns that tefillin, the Makam Shel tefillin, it's not too deep. It's two side by side. So how do you have the ornament going over his head that only halfway? I'm not sure exactly how it worked. But whatever the case is, there was room for both of them. They took the son of the king. I think this is when Avshalom was rebelling against David. They put these ornaments upon him. Nezar, Zu Kalila, Edus, what's Edus? Amar Yehuda, Amarav, Edus Hula Beis David, Shekala Royal Malchus, Halamtai. Whoever is Royal Malchus, will the crown fit? Or She'ena Royal Malchus, Ena Lamtai, it won't fit. So Adoniyah ben Chagis Misnase, it was Adoniyah who wanted to become king. Lamor, he said, I'm great, I'm the Emelech, I'm going to be the king. But Amar Yehuda, Amarav, Shemisnase, Lahelmoy, V'loy Lamtai. It didn't fit. It didn't fit. He couldn't get the crown on. And we learned earlier in the Gemara, not in Zara, I don't remember which Masechta, that the way it worked is the crown in it had a bar that went across from end to end. So imagine your hat has a bar going across inside. You couldn't get it on your head. The bar wouldn't let it sit. But the Malchus Bestovid, if you had the royal blood that you were right to be a king, HaKadosh Baruch Hu made a groove across her head. The bar fit right into that groove. It fit perfectly. He didn't have that, so it's assumed he wasn't royal Malchus. So what did he do to build up his image? He wanted to wear the crown, but it didn't fit him. So what did he do? He made himself a whole entourage. What was so special about these people? Tana, we learned, they all had their spleens removed, which made them be able to run and took away any sluggish properties that they might have had. And the skin at the bottom of their feet were cut off, meaning there were no nerves on the bottom of their feet, which means they were able to run barefoot on stones, on rocks, on thorns. They didn't feel it. And that's what he did to create his honor. Okay, so Baruch Hashem, it's already Thursday, and we're only.
So basically, you're saying they were
We'll
black.
have to get a whole other Omid ahead.
Is that what you're saying?
Between tomorrow and Shabbos, we'll be able to.
So basically, what you're saying was they were black Africans.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, Shkoyach.